HL7 to FHIR migration, what hospitals need to know before the 2027 deadline. HL7 to FHIR migration, what hospitals need to know before the 2027 deadline. That's what we're tackling today. If you've been wondering about HL7 to FHIR migration, stick around. Now, what is HL7 to FHIR migration? HL7 to FHIR migration means transitioning your healthcare data exchange from HL7 v2 or v3 messaging standards to FHIR, a modern REST-based specification built on JSON, HTTP, and OAuth 2.0. The two standards reflect completely different architectural assumptions. HL7 v2 was designed in the 1980s around pipe-delimited flat file messages sent over a proprietary TCP protocol called MLLP. FHIR treats every clinical concept as a structured API resource, queryable and returnable via standard web conventions that any developer with REST experience can work with immediately. The CMS interoperability and prior authorization final rule requires payers and providers participating in CMS programs to implement FHIR or FHIR-based APIs by January 2027. Now, the real technical challenges of HL7 to FHIR migration. The honest picture, this migration is harder than most project timelines account for. Switching data formats is the straightforward part. The difficult part is that your HL7 v2 messages contain 20 years of local customizations that no automated mapping tool handles reliably. Standard HL7 v2 segments like, and map to FHIR resources like, and. Published mapping guides exist for these standard segments. The problem is the Z segments, local codes, non-standard field placements, and vendor-specific extensions that every hospital accumulates over years of integration work. A typical midsize hospital has 40 to 60 distinct HL7 v2 message variants across its EHR, lab, radiology, and pharmacy systems. Each variant needs individual mapping logic and validation testing. Budget 3 to 6 months of mapping effort for a medium complexity environment. Organizations with heavily customized systems or older EHR platforms should budget closer to 12 months for the mapping work alone. Next up, how .NET application modernization fits FHIR migration. Most hospital integration engines and clinical systems in the US run on .NET framework. ASP.NET Web Forms applications from 2006 to 2012, WCF services processing HL7 messages, Windows services polling lab system queues. When FHIR migration work starts, teams almost always discover that the system feeding the new FHIR API is a 15-year-old .NET Framework 4.6 application with no current technical owner. This is where .NET application modernization and FHIR migration intersect more than project plans usually account for. Modern .NET FHIR servers are built on ASP.NET Core alongside libraries like the HL7 FHIR.NET SDK or FHIRly server. These provide FHIR resource serialization and deserialization, built-in validation against FHIR profiles, and RESTful endpoint scaffolding for standard FHIR operations. Let's talk about moving on to what the FHIR migration process actually looks like. No two hospital FHIR migrations are identical, but the phases are consistent enough to plan around with reasonable confidence. Before any code is written, you need an accurate inventory of what exists. This means cataloging every HL7 v2 message type currently in production, mapping existing data flows to their target FHIR resources, identifying which source systems will need API changes, and assessing security architecture gaps for OAuth 2.0 compliance. Most organizations find 3 to 5 times more HL7 integrations than they believed going into this phase. One hospital we worked with expected roughly 20 distinct HL7 message variants and discovered 74 across 12 different systems. The gap analysis phase is where project scope gets set properly, and rushing it creates delays in every phase that follows. Let's talk about choosing the right technology stack for your FHIR build. The technology decisions you make during this migration will run for the next 10 to 15 years. Getting them right matters more than getting them done quickly, especially in a regulated environment where changing the stack mid-operation carries significant compliance retesting costs. If your FHIR migration includes a new patient portal, blazor development services deserve serious consideration for teams with existing .NET expertise. Blazor Server renders UI on the server with SignalR. Blazor WebAssembly runs C# directly in the browser via WebAssembly, giving you 2 deployment models from a single .NET codebase. For healthcare teams already working in C#, blazor means developers can share FHIR data models directly between the API layer and the patient portal, eliminating the JSON serialization mismatches that consistently introduce bugs in mixed stack implementations. This is not a minor benefit when your FHIR patient resource schema needs to match exactly what patients see on screen. We compared both frameworks in depth in Blazor versus React for enterprise apps, when each one wins. Next up, how to select a partner for your FHIR migration. Most hospitals cannot staff a complete FHIR migration from internal resources while maintaining normal IT operations. Choosing the right enterprise application development partner often matters more than any single technology decision made during the project. A qualified partner should demonstrate hands-on FHIR delivery experience, including passing Inferno conformance testing on a real CMS program submission, not just familiarity with the FHIR specification. They need enough HL7 v2 knowledge to handle Z-segment mapping edge cases without escalating every non-standard segment to your team. And they should have documented HIPAA compliance delivery on similar scale projects. FHIR Services specializes in .NET modernization with human-in-the-loop governance for enterprise applications, meaning clinical data mappings receive structured human review before reaching production. For systems where a mapping error could affect a patient's medication history or prior authorization decision, that review layer has real clinical significance beyond process compliance. Next up, let's talk about conclusion. HL7 to FHIR migration is a multi-year effort that most hospital IT teams have underestimated. The 2027 deadline is firm, the Inferno test suite is unforgiving, and the HL7 v2 complexity buried in your integration infrastructure will surprise you when mapping work begins in earnest. The practical path forward: start your gap analysis immediately, adopt the Strangler Fig pattern to phase the migration without big bang risk, and build on .NET technologies your team already knows. Use ASP.NET Development Services expertise for the FHIR server, Azure Health Data Services for managed infrastructure, and Blazor where you need modern patient-facing interfaces maintained by the same team as your API layer. If your organization needs a partner for this work, look for a team combining deep HL7 to FHIR migration delivery experience, proven .NET application modernization capability, and a governance model that keeps human review in the loop for clinical data decisions. The 2027 deadline is close enough that delaying this conversation is no longer a reasonable option.